When a pregnant, homeless woman saw a tiny 5-year-old boy sobbing alone on a busy street, everyone else turned away. She didn't. Though hungry and exhausted, she spent her last coins to feed him, wrapped him in her only blanket, and refused to leave his side through the cold night. That quiet moment of courage, one heart choosing compassion over fear, set off a chain of miracles neither could imagine. Their lives, once marked by loss, were rewritten by love, safety, and a new beginning. This story will break your heart, mend it, and remind you how a single act of kindness can change everything. Listen closely. The late afternoon sun was fading, leaving the city washed in a dusty orange glow. Cars honked and rushed past as if they had somewhere far more important to be. Megan sat on a piece of cardboard near the corner of a busy street, her back pressed against the rough wall of a closed shop. Her belly, round and heavy beneath her faded dress, reminded her of the tiny life growing inside her. Every small kick made her both proud and nervous. She whispered a promise to the baby she hadn't yet met. "We'll be okay." Somehow, a paper cup rested beside her, holding only a few coins that clinked whenever someone's shoe brushed against it. Most people avoided even looking at her. She had stopped expecting kindness. Hunger pressed into her ribs, and her lips felt dry from the warm breeze. She shifted uncomfortably, trying to stretch her aching legs. Life on the streets wasn't new anymore. She had been out here for months, ever since her parents shut their door on her and the baby she carried. They hadn't cared that the father of her child disappeared as soon as he heard the word pregnant. They hadn't listened when she pleaded for one more chance. Now the city sidewalk was her only home. Some nights she found a corner in an unfinished building to hide from the cold. Other nights she stayed awake, afraid someone might try to hurt her while she slept. As the light dimmed, Megan pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. The evening air smelled of fried food and exhaust fumes. She rubbed her stomach and thought about how many hours it had been since she last ate. A man in a crisp white shirt passed by without a glance. A group of teenagers laughed loudly, their sneakers flashing as they moved. No one slowed down. No one noticed. Then she heard it. A soft, shaky cry. At first Megan thought it was her imagination. She tilted her head, listening carefully. The sound came again, high and frightened. A child's sob hidden in the noise of the street. Her heart skipped. She turned toward the sound and spotted a small figure a few steps away near a lamppost. It was a boy, maybe 5 years old, dressed in a t-shirt and shorts that were neat but now smudged with dust. His dark hair stuck up in uneven tufts. He stood alone, shoulders trembling as he rubbed his eyes with tiny fists. Megan pushed herself up, feeling the weight of her pregnancy but ignoring it. "Hey there," she said softly, taking a careful step forward. "Hi, sweetheart." The boy froze and looked up. His wide brown eyes were glossy with tears. He hiccuped but didn't speak. "It's okay," Megan said, crouching so she was closer to his height. Her knees complained against the hard pavement. "I'm Megan. What's your name?" The boy opened his mouth but no sound came out. He sniffled and glanced around as if searching for someone he couldn't find. Megan's heart ached. "Are you lost? Where's your mom or dad?" She scanned the street, hoping to see a frantic parent rushing toward them, but people kept walking by, some casting quick, uncomfortable glances before looking away. The boy shook his head, tears sliding down his cheeks. Megan offered a small smile meant to be calming. "It's okay, honey. You're safe with me." She extended her hand slowly, letting him see she meant no harm. "Come sit with me for a bit. We'll figure this out." He hesitated, then nodded ever so slightly. Megan guided him back to the spot where she had been sitting. They lowered themselves to the curb together. She could feel how tense he was, his small shoulders stiff as stone. Her own stomach rumbled, a cruel reminder of how little she had eaten. She thought of the single crumpled bill in her pocket, the last of the money she'd collected that day. It was supposed to buy her dinner, maybe a small loaf of bread. But the boy's thin arms and frightened eyes left no room for hesitation. "Wait here, okay? Don't move," she said. "I'm just crossing the street to get you something to eat." The boy's gaze followed her, uncertain, but he stayed put. Megan hurried to a small food stand nearby. The smell of warm rice and beans drifted through the air. She handed over the precious bill and accepted a small plate wrapped in paper. Her own hunger screamed at the sight of the food, but she carried it back carefully. "Here you go," she said, placing the plate in his lap. He looked at her, surprised, then at the food. The moment she nodded, he began to eat. He shoveled the rice into his mouth so quickly that she had to remind him, "Slow down a little or you'll choke." The boy barely paused. Watching him stirred something deep in Megan's chest, an ache beyond hunger, a mix of sadness and fierce protectiveness. "You must have been hungry for a long time," she said softly. When he finally finished, he sat back and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Some of the tension left his small frame. Megan tried again, her voice gentle. "Can you tell me your name now?" The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Griffin." "Griffin," she repeated with a small smile. "That's a strong name." "Hi, Griffin." He gave a shy nod. "Do you remember where your mom or dad are?" she asked. Griffin's eyes filled again and he shook his head quickly. "It's okay," Megan said, reaching out to lightly pat his shoulder. "Don't worry, we'll find them." The sky was turning purple at the edges, the first stars trying to shine through the city lights. Megan knew she had to think fast. She couldn't leave a 5-year-old alone, but she also couldn't keep him with her forever. The police, she thought. Maybe they would help. She stood and offered her hand. "Come on, Griffin. Let's go find someone who can help us." He slid his small hand into hers, the warmth surprising against her cold fingers. They started toward the nearest police station, a quiet pair moving through the noisy city. Megan ignored her own hunger and the dull ache in her feet. Right now, the only thing that mattered was making sure Griffin found his way back to his family. The walk to the police station felt longer than it was. Megan's shoes, already thin from months of wear, scraped against the rough sidewalk. The streetlights flickered to life one by one, glowing like tiny moons in the growing dark. Griffin clutched her hand so tightly that she could feel every small tremor in his body. "Almost there," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it comforted him or herself. The station's neon sign came into view, buzzing faintly against the deepening sky. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and damp paper. A tired-looking officer sat behind a counter, leaning back in his chair. He barely lifted his head when they stepped in. "Excuse me," Megan said, trying to sound calm and respectful. "This boy is lost. I found him on Market Street. I think he's been missing for a while." The officer finally glanced up. His eyes moved from Megan's swollen belly to her frayed jacket and scuffed shoes, then to Griffin, whose cheeks were still streaked with dried tears. The look he gave them made Megan's stomach knot. "Aha," he said flatly. "Where'd you pick him up?" "I just told you, on Market Street," she repeated. "He doesn't know where his parents are. Please, can you help us find them?" The officer leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Lady, we get people like you every week. Homeless women show up with kids, say they're lost, and hope we'll give them a hot meal and a place to sleep." "I'm not buying it." Megan blinked, stunned. "I'm not lying. I don't even know him. I just found him alone and crying." "Sure you did," he said with a dry laugh. "Look, social services is closed for the night." Megan's heart pounded. "I'm not playing games. Please." "His family must be looking for him." The officer stood, his voice sharp now. "I said take him somewhere else. We're busy." A door slammed in the back, the sound final as a judge's gavel. Megan felt the heat of frustration burn her cheeks. She wanted to yell, to demand he care, but Griffin's small hand trembled in hers. She swallowed her anger. A fight wouldn't help. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "We'll figure something out." They stepped back into the night. The city's hum seemed louder, the air colder. Megan pulled her jacket tighter and glanced at Griffin. His face was pale and tired, his eyes shiny with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she said. "They should have helped." He looked up at her but said nothing. Megan crouched so they were eye to eye. "You can stay with me tonight. It's not much, but it's safe. Tomorrow we'll try again." Griffin nodded once, as if trusting her completely. The streets grew quieter as they walked. Shop windows were dark, and the smell of fresh bread from a bakery faded into the heavy night. Megan led Griffin to the edge of the city, where an unfinished building stood like a giant skeleton. Concrete walls rose without windows, and rusty rods poked from the ground like old spears. "This is where I stay," she said softly. "It isn't pretty, but it keeps the rain out." Inside, moonlight spilled through gaps in the roof. Megan spread her thin blanket on the dry corner she usually claimed. She set her small bag down and dug out the last piece of bread she had been saving. It was hard around the edges, but Griffin's eyes brightened. "Here," she said, handing it to him. "Eat it slowly." He broke the bread carefully, as though afraid it might disappear, and ate in quiet bites. Megan watched, her own stomach tightening with hunger, but she felt oddly full just seeing him eat. When he was done, she brushed crumbs from his small hands. "Do you want to tell me anything about your home? Anything at all?" Griffin tilted his head, thinking. "Big house," he said finally, his voice soft. "Lots of trees." "Okay," Megan said, holding on to the small clue. "That's good. Anything else? A street name? Your mom or dad's name?" He frowned, tiny brows pulling together. "Daddy Brian," he whispered. Megan smiled gently. "That's great. Daddy Brian. We'll remember that." Griffin yawned and rubbed his eyes. The long day had worn him down. Megan helped him settle on the blanket, then sat beside him. The baby inside her kicked, a soft reminder of the life she carried. She rested a hand on her belly and whispered to both children. One unborn, one unexpected. "We're safe tonight, I promise." Griffin's breathing soon slowed to the steady rhythm of sleep. Megan stayed awake, listening to the distant sounds of traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog. The night was cool but not cruel. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. Morning sunlight slanted across the cracked walls of the unfinished building, warming Megan's face. She opened her eyes slowly, careful not to wake Griffin, who was still curled beside her beneath the thin blanket. For a moment she simply listened to his quiet breathing, a sound soft enough to calm the restless ache in her heart. Her own stomach growled in protest. They hadn't eaten since last night's dry crust of bread, and she knew the boy would be hungry the moment he woke. Megan checked the small paper cup she used to collect spare change when she begged on the streets. Inside lay a handful of coins, strangers' tiny acts of kindness from the day before. It wasn't much, but it was something. She slipped the coins into her pocket and gently shook Griffin's shoulder. "Good morning, buddy," she whispered. "Let's find some breakfast." Griffin rubbed his eyes, blinking up at the pale morning light. "Food?" he asked in a sleepy voice. Megan smiled. "Yes, food." They left the shelter of the cold concrete walls and walked toward the bustling market street. The city was already awake. Vendors shouting, buses honking. The air full of the smell of fried dough and roasted peanuts. Megan's stomach rumbled again as she approached a small food stall where a woman flipped steaming bean cakes on a hot pan. With a shy smile, Megan held out her coins. "How much can we get for this?" The woman counted the coins and gave her 2 warm bean cakes wrapped in paper. Megan thanked her and handed one to Griffin. The boy took a cautious bite, then smiled, his eyes lighting up. Seeing his face brighten filled Megan with a quiet pride. At least she could give him this small comfort. After they ate, Megan led Griffin back to the busy corner where she had found him yesterday. She chose the same spot near the lamppost, hoping that someone searching for a lost child might think to look here. They sat on the curb together as the morning traffic thickened. Hours passed. Megan watched the crowds, scanning every face for a hint of worry or recognition. She pictured a frantic mother pushing through the throng, or a father calling his son's name. But the faces that passed were distracted. People rushing to work, to school, to errands. No one slowed. To keep Griffin's spirits up, Megan told him little stories. How clouds shaped like dragons raced across the sky. How the pigeons were secret messengers. How every car carried its own adventure. He giggled when she made funny voices, his laughter like a small melody amid the city's noise. It was late afternoon when a shiny black SUV slowed near them. The door opened and a man in a driver's uniform jumped out. He looked frantic, scanning the street until his eyes landed on Griffin. "Griffin!" the man shouted. Griffin's head snapped up. "That's my name," he whispered, hope lighting his face. The driver hurried over. "Where have you been, young master?" "We've been searching everywhere." Megan stepped between them. "Do you know this boy?" "Yes, ma'am," the driver said quickly. "He's my boss's son. He went missing yesterday. We've been searching all night." Megan studied his worried face. She wanted to believe him, but caution held her back. "If you're telling the truth, I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "Of course," he said, relief flooding his voice. "Please. His father will be so thankful." Megan held Griffin's hand as they climbed into the SUV. The soft seats felt strange after weeks of cold concrete. Griffin leaned against her, already more relaxed. Megan kept her eyes on the window as the city scenery changed. Stores and crowded sidewalks gave way to wide streets lined with trees and tall gates. Finally they turned into a grand driveway that curved toward a mansion with glowing windows. Megan's breath caught. The house looked like something from a movie. The driver called ahead, and by the time they reached the entrance, a tall man in his early 30s stood waiting on the steps. He was handsome, with sharp features and warm brown eyes that searched for his child. The moment the car stopped, Griffin leaped out. "Daddy!" he cried, running straight into the man's arms. The man knelt, hugging his son tight. "Griffin, thank God," he whispered. Megan stayed by the car, suddenly shy. The driver explained quickly how Megan had found the boy and cared for him. The tall man stepped forward and offered a grateful smile. "I'm Brian," he said. "I can't thank you enough for bringing my son back to me." Megan nodded, her heart still racing. "I'm just glad he's safe," she said softly. The mansion smelled faintly of fresh bread and polished wood. Megan followed Brian and Griffin through a wide hallway lined with tall windows. Sunlight spilled across the marble floor, so bright she had to blink. Her worn shoes squeaked with every step, and she wished for a moment that she looked different, cleaner, less like someone who had slept on cold concrete the night before. "Come in," Brian said with a gentle smile. "You must be hungry." Megan hesitated at the threshold of a grand dining room. A table as long as a small car gleamed under a chandelier of crystal and gold. Plates and glasses sparkled. The smell of roasted chicken and herbs made her stomach twist with both hunger and nerves. I don't want to intrude," she said softly. "You saved my son," Brian replied. "You could never be an intruder here." He pulled out a chair for her, and his kindness left her with nothing to say. Griffin climbed into the seat beside her, swinging his small legs under the chair. "Daddy, can Megan sit next to me forever?" he asked, eyes bright. Brian laughed, a deep warm sound that filled the room. "Let's start with lunch today," he said. "Then we'll see." A housekeeper brought steaming bowls of soup and warm bread. Megan murmured a shy thank you. It had been weeks since she'd eaten food that wasn't from a corner shop. She tried to eat slowly, but each bite felt like the best she'd ever tasted. Brian watched her with quiet interest. "You don't have to answer," he said, "but I'd like to know how you ended up on that street with my son. You seem too young and too strong to be out there alone." Megan lowered her spoon and clasped her hands in her lap. For a moment she thought about hiding the truth, but something in Brian's calm gaze made her feel safe. "My parents asked me to leave when they found out I was pregnant," she began. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "My boyfriend didn't want the baby. He said it was all my problem. I tried staying with friends, but nobody had room for long. I've been on the streets for a few months now. Some days I get small jobs, washing windows, sweeping shops, but it's never enough for rent." Brian's face tightened with quiet anger, though not at her. "And the baby's father? He just walked away." She nodded. "I haven't heard from him since." Silence filled the room except for the soft clink of Griffin's spoon. Megan's cheeks burned. She hated pity almost as much as hunger. But Brian didn't look at her with pity. His eyes held respect, as if he saw not just a homeless girl but a fighter. "You've kept going through all that," he said at last. "That takes courage." Megan gave a small shrug. "I just didn't know what else to do. I have to keep the baby safe. That's all that matters." Brian leaned back, studying her. "Where are you staying now?" "An old building near the bus station," she said. "The roof leaks, but it's better than sleeping outside." Brian's jaw tightened again. "That's no place for you. Or the baby." Megan stared at her bowl, unsure how to reply. She had learned long ago not to expect help. After a long pause, Brian spoke again, his voice firm but gentle. "I have a guest house on the property. It's private, with its own small kitchen and bath. My housekeeper has been looking for extra help. If you'd like, you could stay there and work here. Cleaning, organizing, nothing heavy. You'd have your own space, your own key. And you'd be paid, of course." Megan's breath caught. You don't even know me." "I know you cared for a child who wasn't yours," Brian said. "I know you walked into a police station when everyone else kept walking by. That tells me enough." Tears pricked Megan's eyes before she could stop them. No one had offered her kindness in months, not without expecting something in return. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Completely sure," Brian replied. "You'd be helping me too. Griffin clearly adores you." Griffin grinned, soup spoon in hand. "Please say yes, Megan." Megan let out a shaky laugh. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes, thank you. Thank you so much." Relief washed through her like warm sunlight. For the first time in what felt like forever, Tomorrow didn't look empty. Later that afternoon, Brian gave her a tour of the property. The guest house stood a short walk from the main mansion, surrounded by a small garden of bright flowers. Inside, the rooms were simple but clean. A cozy living area, a neat bedroom, and a kitchen with shiny counters. Compared to the damp corner of the abandoned building, it felt like a palace. "This will be yours," Brian said, handing her a small silver key. "Take your time to settle in. If you need clothes or anything for the baby, we can arrange that." Megan ran her hand along the smooth wall, half afraid she was dreaming. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You already have," Brian replied softly. "You kept Griffin safe. That's more than I can ever repay." Griffin darted into the guest house and jumped onto the couch, giggling. "Can I visit Megan every day?" "Every day," Brian said, smiling. Over the next week, Megan learned her new routine. She woke early to tidy the large house, dusting the grand staircase and wiping the long windows until they shone. The work was steady but never harsh. She had her own quiet mornings in the guest house, making tea and feeling the baby kick while birds sang outside. Griffin followed her everywhere he could. He helped carry towels and tried to sweep, though he mostly made small piles of dust in the wrong places. "You're my best friend," he told her one afternoon, beaming up at her with a toothy grin. The words filled Megan with unexpected warmth. She hadn't realized how lonely she had been until this small boy decided she mattered. Sometimes, when Griffin ran off to play, Brian would pause to chat with her. He asked about her favorite books, the food she missed from home, and what she hoped for the baby's future. He listened carefully, never rushing her answers. Megan found herself smiling more than she had in months. One evening, as she left the main house, Brian called after her. "Megan," he said, holding out a paper bag. "Fresh bread. Still warm." She accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you. You deserve it," he said simply. Walking back to the guest house with the warm loaf in her hands, Megan felt something new. A small, quiet hope. The world had not given up on her after all. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a safe life for her child. And for the first time since the day she'd been turned away from her family's door, she believed that tomorrow could be better than today. The next Saturday morning began like most of Megan's new days. Warm sunlight streamed through the guest house curtains, and birds chirped in the garden. She stretched, feeling the quiet kick of her baby, and the soft peace of a place that finally felt safe. After breakfast, she walked to the main house to begin her chores, polishing the grand stair rails and wiping the tall windows that caught the morning light. Griffin met her halfway down the hall, his face bright. "Megan, Daddy says we're having a special visitor today." "Oh." Megan knelt to tie his untied shoelace. "Who's coming?" He lowered his voice like it was a secret. "Gloria, Daddy's almost wife." Megan smiled, though she felt a small tug of curiosity. Brian had mentioned a fiancé once, in a quiet way, but never with excitement. "That sounds nice," she said. "Will you help me keep the house tidy for her?" Griffin grinned. "Yes." By early afternoon, the sound of tires on gravel announced the visitor. Through the tall front window, Megan saw a sleek silver sports car glide to a stop. A woman stepped out, tall and elegant, wearing a cream-colored dress that looked as if it had been made only for her. Her black hair shone in the sunlight, and large sunglasses hid most of her face. Everything about her seemed perfect and expensive. Brian opened the door, smiling politely. "Gloria," he said. She removed her glasses and kissed his cheek. "Brian," she replied in a voice smooth as silk but cool as marble. Her eyes shifted quickly to Megan, who stood near the staircase holding a dust cloth. "And who is this?" Gloria asked, her tone sharp enough to cut. Brian's smile softened. "This is Megan. She helped Griffin when he was lost. She works here now." Gloria's lips formed a thin line. "Oh, how kind." Megan offered a small nod. "Nice to meet you." Gloria's eyes swept over Megan's simple dress and worn shoes. "Yes, nice," she said, though her voice carried no warmth. That evening, Megan stayed out of the way while Brian and Gloria ate dinner in the candlelit dining room. She cleaned the kitchen quietly, but Gloria's laughter, light yet cold, floated through the hall. Every few minutes, Megan caught Gloria's glance in her direction, a quick flick of sharp eyes that made her stomach tighten. After dinner, Megan began wiping the counters when Gloria appeared in the doorway. "Megan, was it?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Megan answered. "The windows in the sitting room look streaked," Gloria said. Could you handle that before you leave? I just cleaned them this morning, Megan said gently. But I can check again. Gloria tilted her head with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Please do. I like things spotless. Megan simply nodded and gathered her cloths. She had learned that some battles weren't worth fighting. Over the next week, Gloria visited often. Each time, she found new ways to test Megan's patience. One morning Gloria entered the kitchen carrying a cup of steaming coffee. Megan was mopping the floor. The hall still feels dusty, Gloria said. I swept it an hour ago, Megan replied. Gloria smiled, then slowly tipped her cup, spilling dark coffee across the just-mopped tiles. Now it's dirty, she said softly. Would you mind cleaning it again? Megan's heart thudded. She wanted to shout, why are you doing this? But she only said, of course, and reached for the mop. Griffin, who had been coloring at the table, jumped up. That's not nice, Gloria. Hush, dear, Gloria said with a fake sweetness. Adults are talking. Griffin scowled but looked at Megan, who gave him a small shake of her head. It wasn't worth upsetting him further. Later that day, Megan stepped outside to breathe in the cool air. Brian found her by the rose bushes. You okay? He asked. She forced a smile. Just getting some air. His eyes narrowed. Has Gloria been giving you trouble? Megan hesitated. She's particular. Brian sighed. I'm sorry. She can be demanding. He looked toward the house, a shadow crossing his face. I'll talk to her. No, Megan said quickly. Please don't. I don't want to cause trouble. I can handle it. Brian studied her for a moment, then nodded. If you change your mind, tell me. The days passed, and Gloria's small cruelties grew sharper. She left fingerprints on freshly cleaned mirrors and claimed Megan hadn't polished them. She accidentally knocked over vases and asked Megan to scrub the carpets again. Through it all, Megan kept her voice calm and her smile steady. She reminded herself that she had a warm bed now, and her baby needed her to stay strong. Griffin noticed more than she realized. One evening, as they folded laundry together, he whispered, I don't like Gloria. She's mean to you. Megan smoothed his hair. It's okay, Griff. Sometimes people act unkind for reasons we don't know. But we stay kind anyway. He nodded, though his little brow stayed furrowed. That night, alone in the guest house, Megan rubbed her belly and let the baby's small kicks steady her. Gloria's coldness hurt, but it couldn't erase the gratitude she felt for the safe place or the growing bond she shared with Griffin. Whatever storms Gloria tried to stir, Megan reminded herself she had survived worse. And for the tiny life inside her, she would stay steady, no matter how sharp Gloria's smile became. The morning air was warm and heavy with the smell of roses. Megan was polishing the tall windows in the sitting room while Brian finished a phone call in his office down the hall. Griffin was outside chasing butterflies, his happy shouts floating through the open door. The front door opened with a soft click. Gloria's heels tapped sharply across the marble floor. Megan kept her eyes on the glass, hoping for a quiet visit, but the sharp rhythm of Gloria's steps stopped behind her. I don't know why Brian keeps that girl here, Gloria said, her voice low but sharp enough to slice the air. A homeless maid with a baby on the way. What will people think when they see her in this house? Megan froze, her cloth pressed against the window. Gloria wasn't talking to her. She was on the phone. I told Brian she doesn't belong here, Gloria continued, her tone dripping with disdain. It's charity, that's all. And one day he'll regret it. A floorboard creaked. Gloria gasped and spun around. Brian stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes dark with anger. Gloria, he said, his voice cool and even, we need to talk. Gloria quickly ended the call. Brian, this isn't what it sounds like. It sounds like you were insulting someone who has shown nothing but kindness and hard work, he replied. Gloria's chin lifted. I'm only being honest. People will judge you for keeping her here. She's not our kind of people. Our kind of people? Brian stepped closer, his voice rising. She protected my son when you were nowhere around. She works harder than anyone I know. Don't you dare talk about her like that. Gloria's eyes flashed. You don't see it, do you? You're letting some stray girl take over this house. She's beneath us, Brian. Megan's stomach tightened, but she stayed silent. This wasn't her fight. Brian's voice hardened. The only person acting beneath themselves right now is you. Gloria's face flushed with anger. You can't speak to me like that. I just did, he said evenly. For a moment, the room felt frozen. Then Gloria spun on her heel. "Fine. If you want to ruin your reputation for a servant, be my guest." Her heels clicked sharply as she stormed out, the door slamming behind her. Megan turned back to the window, unsure what to say. Brian stepped closer, his expression softening. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said quietly. "It's okay," Megan replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm used to people judging." "You shouldn't have to be," he said. "Not here." Later that afternoon, Brian found her in the garden where she was trimming the rose bushes. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. "There's nothing to talk about," Megan said, snipping a thorny branch. "She doesn't like me." "That's fine." "It's not fine," he said firmly. "You deserve respect." Megan looked up at him. His eyes held a warmth that eased the sting of Gloria's words. "Thank you," she said softly. Brian smiled faintly. "You know, you've changed this house more than you realize. Griffin laughs more. The staff is happier. Even I feel different." Megan felt her cheeks warm. "I just try to do my job." "It's more than that," he said. "It's who you are." They stood in comfortable silence, the late sun painting the garden gold. For the first time in months, Megan felt truly seen. Days passed, and their conversations deepened almost without planning. In the evenings, after Griffin went to bed, Brian would sometimes join Megan on the guesthouse porch. They spoke of simple things. Books they loved, the smell of rain on hot pavement, memories from childhood. One night, as crickets sang in the dark, Brian asked, "What do you want for the future? For yourself and the baby?" Megan looked up at the stars. "A safe home," she said. "A place where no one tells me I don't belong." "You deserve that," he said. "And more." She turned toward him, catching the quiet admiration in his gaze. Something unspoken passed between them, gentle but strong. Brian also began noticing small details about her. How she hummed when she worked, how she listened with her whole heart when Griffin spoke, how she always found kind words even when others were harsh. Her strength showed not in loudness but in the way she kept going. One afternoon, he watched from the veranda as she knelt to help Griffin build a tiny tower of stones. The boy laughed when the tower wobbled, and Megan laughed with him, her smile bright despite the summer heat. Brian felt a quiet pull, a respect that grew into something warmer. Another evening, a soft rain began to fall. Megan stood under the porch roof, enjoying the cool drops. Brian joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot tea. "You always know when I need this," she said, accepting the mug. He smiled. "Maybe I'm learning." They listened to the rain together, the sound like a gentle drum. "You have a calm about you," Brian said. "Even with everything you've faced." "I don't always feel calm," Megan admitted. "But I try. For the baby. For Griffin, too." He glanced at her, his eyes kind. "You've given us both more than you know." Gloria returned to the mansion only once that week, her visits short and cold. She barely looked at Megan and spoke to Brian in clipped sentences. The tension was clear, but Megan focused on her work and the quiet moments with Griffin and Brian. Late one night, after Gloria had left again, Brian knocked softly on the guesthouse door. Megan opened it, surprised. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay," he said. "After everything." "I'm fine," she said, smiling. "Really?" He lingered in the doorway. "You make this place feel like a home," he said quietly. "For Griffin. For me." For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the night insects. Then Brian gave a small, almost shy smile. "Good night, Megan." "Good night, Brian," she replied, her heart unexpectedly light. As the door closed, Megan rested a hand on her growing belly. She thought of how far she'd come. From cold sidewalks to this warm guesthouse. From being unseen to sharing quiet, meaningful talks under the stars. She knew feelings were forming between them, unspoken but real, and she couldn't help but wonder where this new beginning might lead. The evening air felt heavy, as if the house itself held its breath. Megan moved quietly through the wide hallway, a basket of folded laundry balanced on her hip. Outside, a late summer storm grumbled in the distance. She liked these hours after dinner when the mansion grew calm. Griffin was already in bed, and Brian had gone to his study to finish some calls. She paused by the big window at the end of the hall. Lightning flickered across the sky, lighting the roses below like brief fireworks. Megan smiled faintly. For weeks now, the mansion had begun to feel like a safe world. A world she never believed could belong to someone like her. From deeper inside the house came the soft echo of a voice. At first she thought it was Brian on the phone, but the sound carried a sharper edge. Gloria. Megan hadn't seen Brian's fiancée for a few days, and she was grateful. Each visit from Gloria brought a fresh chill to the air. Still, Brian insisted Gloria had the right to visit. They were technically still engaged, even if his tone whenever he said the word grew more tired each week. Curious, Megan followed the voice to the sitting room. The door was almost closed, a sliver of golden light spilling into the hallway. She stopped just short of the crack and tilted her head. "You promised me it would be done," Gloria hissed. "I gave you more than enough time." A man's voice answered, low and muffled, impossible to recognize. "You don't understand," Gloria snapped, louder this time. "Brian thinks that boy is everything. As long as Griffin is alive, Brian will never love anyone else fully. I won't have my own children pushed aside." Megan's heart stumbled. "As long as Griffin is alive?" Another rumble of thunder covered the next words. But when it faded, Megan heard, clear as a knife, "You failed once. I won't forgive another mistake." She clutched the laundry basket tighter, her hands suddenly damp. The memory of that night months ago, finding Griffin alone on the street, trembling and hungry, rushed back like a storm tide. Could Gloria have? The man muttered something again. Gloria's reply came cold and certain. "Handle it. No witnesses this time." Megan's breath caught. The laundry basket slid from her arms and landed softly on the carpet. She pressed herself against the wall, praying the sound hadn't carried. The door creaked. Gloria stepped out, phone in hand, her eyes narrow and calculating. For one terrifying second Megan thought those eyes would find her in the shadows. But Gloria turned toward the front door and strode away, her heels clicking like distant gunfire. The front door opened, then shut with a soft thud. Megan's knees felt weak. She forced herself to breathe, to stay quiet until the sound of Gloria's car faded down the driveway. Only then did she bend to retrieve the laundry basket, though her hands trembled so badly that a towel slipped to the floor. In her guest house later, Megan paced the small living room, heart racing. She couldn't have meant what it sounded like, she told herself. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe Gloria's words were only angry nonsense. But deep down she knew the truth. The night she found Griffin wasn't random. Someone had wanted him gone, and Gloria had just confirmed it. Megan wrapped her arms around her stomach. The baby kicked softly, as if sensing her fear. She thought of Griffin's bright eyes, the way he laughed when she read him stories. The idea of anyone harming him made her feel cold all over. She knew she should tell Brian. But would he believe her? Gloria was his fiancée, a woman he had once loved enough to promise marriage. And Megan was, well, a homeless girl with a growing belly and no proof. Still, silence wasn't an option. Griffin's life could depend on her courage. Brian was still awake when Megan knocked on the study door. He looked up from a stack of papers, surprised. "Megan? Is something wrong?" She stepped inside, her voice shaking. "I need to tell you something. It's about Gloria." Brian set down his pen immediately. "Go on." She took a deep breath and told him everything. The phone call, the words she'd overheard, the icy certainty in Gloria's voice. She repeated the phrases as clearly as she could, her heart pounding with every syllable. When she finished, silence stretched between them. The only sound was the soft hum of the desk lamp. Brian's face hardened. "You're sure of what you heard?" "I swear," Megan said. "I wouldn't lie about this." He leaned back, eyes dark with thought. "I believe you," he said at last, his voice low but firm. "It explains so much, the night Griffin disappeared, the way she's been acting. I've had doubts, but this—" He shook his head. "This is different." Relief and fear washed over Megan at once. "What will you do?" "I'll protect my son," Brian said simply. "First thing." The next morning Brian acted with quiet urgency. He called a trusted private investigator named Mr. Hale and explained the situation in a low, steady voice. Hale agreed to review the mansion's security footage and any other evidence. Griffin sensed the tension, clinging to Megan's side. She spent the day keeping him occupied, reading books, building block castles, while Brian met with Hale in his study. By late afternoon, Hale returned with a small drive of files and a grave expression. Brian invited Megan to join them. Together they watched the security footage from the night Griffin went missing. The images were grainy but clear enough. They showed Griffin playing in the garden as dusk fell, a small ball rolling toward the side gate. Moments later, Gloria appeared, speaking quickly to a man in a dark jacket. The man opened the gate. Griffin, following his ball, wandered outside. Gloria looked back once, her face cold, before slipping away into the house. Megan felt her stomach drop. There was no mistaking it. Brian's jaw clenched. "That's enough," he said, voice sharp. Hale nodded. "I can forward this directly to the police. It's more than enough to open an investigation." "Do it," Brian said. The police arrived just after sunset. Griffin slept upstairs, unaware of the storm unfolding below. Megan stood near the fireplace, her hands tight together, as two officers listened to Brian and watched the footage. Their eyes darkened. One officer spoke softly into a radio, and a call went out for Gloria's arrest. It was nearly midnight when Gloria returned, sweeping into the mansion with her usual dramatic flair. She stopped short at the sight of the uniformed officers. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Gloria," Brian said, stepping forward. "We know everything." Gloria's eyes flicked to the officers, then to Megan. "What are you talking about?" "The night Griffin went missing," Brian said evenly. "The cameras recorded you. You opened the gate. You let someone lure him away." Her face went pale, then flushed red. "That's ridiculous. You can't prove." "We have the video," the officer interrupted. For a heartbeat, Gloria seemed to crumble. Then her voice turned desperate. "Brian, please. I only did it because I love you. I needed you to see that." "Stop." Brian cut in, his voice like steel. "Love doesn't try to hurt a child." Gloria's eyes filled with angry tears. "I just wanted us to have a real family. I wanted our children to matter." "You were willing to harm my son," Brian said, his face hard with disgust. "That's not love. That's selfishness." The officers stepped forward. "Gloria Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy and child endangerment," one said, reading her rights. Gloria's gaze darted to Brian one last time. "You'll regret this," she hissed, then turned to Megan with a glare full of venom. "And you ruined everything." Megan held her ground, though her heart thudded. The officers led Gloria out into the night. The door closed behind them with a heavy finality. The mansion felt strangely quiet after they left. Brian stood motionless for a moment, then released a long breath. "It's over," he said softly. Megan stepped closer. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Don't be." He turned toward her, eyes warm despite the tension in his shoulders. "You saved Griffin. Again." Megan shook her head. "I just did what anyone would." "No," Brian said gently. "Not everyone would have listened. Not everyone would have spoken up." He paused. "You have more courage than anyone I know." His words warmed her more than she expected. They moved together to check on Griffin, who slept peacefully, unaware of the danger that had passed. In the days that followed, the mansion felt lighter, as if a heavy curtain had been pulled away. The police kept Brian updated, but Gloria remained in custody. Neighbors whispered, but Brian ignored them. With the tension gone, small, quiet moments began to bloom between Brian and Megan. They often sat on the guesthouse porch after Griffin went to bed, talking while crickets sang. Brian shared stories from his childhood, how he built his first business selling lemonade at age 10, how he once got lost in the woods and was found by his worried father. Megan told him about the books she loved as a girl and the small joys she still found even on the streets. One evening, as a soft breeze stirred the garden, Brian said, "You've changed this house." Griffin laughs more. "I laugh more. That's because of you." Megan smiled shyly. "I just try to help." "It's more than that," he said. "You bring kindness into every room." They sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with something unspoken. Megan felt her heart beat faster. She wasn't sure when admiration had turned into something deeper, but she could feel it now. A quiet pull, steady and warm. Brian looked out at the moonlit roses. "I don't know what the future holds," he said slowly, "but I know I want you and your baby to be part of it." The words settled between them like a promise. Megan felt a calm she hadn't known in years. For the first time since she'd been cast out of her parents' house, she believed that a safe, loving life was truly possible. One evening, the three of them ate dinner on the terrace. Lanterns hung from the beams, and the soft light touched the roses below. A light breeze carried the scent of herbs from the kitchen garden. Griffin chatted about schoolwork and the tower of blocks he planned to build after dessert. He also asked 100 questions about how the moon followed cars at night, and Brian did his best to explain it while Megan listened with an amused face. After Griffin went to bed, Brian stayed out on the terrace with Megan. Stars dusted the sky. The night looked wide and gentle, like it was giving them room to speak. "Megan," Brian said, folding his hands, "I've said thank you so many times that it doesn't sound big enough anymore. You kept my son safe. You kept my home steady. You kept me from forgetting what matters." She shook her head with a small smile. "You gave me a home when I had none," she said softly. "And you gave my baby a chance. I didn't think that was possible for someone like me." "For someone like you?" he repeated, almost surprised. "The strongest person I know? The kindest? Megan, your worth was never in question." Her cheeks warmed. She looked down at her hands. "Thank you." He took a breath. "I don't want this to be just a chapter that ends. I want it to be the rest of our story." She lifted her eyes. He was watching her with a hope that felt careful and sure at the same time. "Megan," he said, voice steady, "will you marry me?" There was no ring in his hand yet. There were no roses thrown on the table or a band to play music. It was just his honest voice in the quiet air. That made it perfect. Her first answer was not a word. It was a simple nod and a soft sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Then she said it clearly so there could be no doubt. "Yes." He let out a breath and stood, moving to her side. He didn't kiss her mouth yet. He pressed a kiss to her forehead first, and then he held her. The world felt very still. Somewhere beyond the garden, a night bird sang. Megan thought of the many nights she had spent alone and scared, and now here she was, held, safe, wanted. Later that week, he took her to a quiet shop where a jeweler showed her simple rings and fancy ones. Megan's eyes kept returning to one with a thin gold band and a small diamond that caught the light like a bright drop of water. "It's beautiful," she whispered, almost afraid to touch it. "It's very you," Brian said. "Graceful, strong in a quiet way." She looked at him. "Then I'll wear it forever." The jeweler smiled as Brian paid. When the ring slid over Megan's finger, she had to blink back tears. It wasn't just a ring. It was a promise that she was not alone. They chose a date that wasn't far away. Megan didn't want a grand show. She wanted something small and true. The garden would be the church. The house staff would be the crowd. A few of Brian's close friends would come, and the private investigator, Mr. Hale, would stand near the back and clap with the gardeners and the cook. No one invited gossiping neighbors. Those who had whispered would have to watch from a distance or not at all. On the morning of the wedding, the sky was clear and soft. The cook served warm bread and fresh fruit. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lane, brushed Megan's hair and fastened a simple white ribbon behind her head. Megan wore a pale dress that skimmed her growing belly. It wasn't tight. It wasn't fancy. It was exactly right. When she looked in the mirror, she saw no past shame. She saw a woman ready to walk forward. Griffin wore a little suit with a small blue tie. He kept jumping in place because he couldn't hold still. "Do I look like a gentleman?" he asked Megan, eyes wide. "You look like the best gentleman in the whole world," she said, kneeling to straighten his collar. "And you look like an angel," he told her, very serious. She hugged him, careful not to crush his tie. The music, played by a single violinist, began. It was simple and sweet. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Brian stood under an arch twined with white flowers. He wore a dark suit and a quiet smile that Megan had grown to love. Griffin walked first, carrying a small booklet that held the vows. He did not drop it, though his hands shook with pride. Megan followed on the path of white petals. She did not look at the faces. She looked only at Brian. When she reached him, he took her hands. The world shrank to the space between them. The words were short and plain on purpose. There were no long speeches. The vows promised simple things: truth, kindness, courage, a home that would always be open. Brian spoke first. His voice did not shake. "I promise to be a safe place for you," he said. "For your child and for mine. I promise to see you and to listen. I promise to make a family with you that puts love first." Megan spoke next. "I promise to stand with you on good days and hard days. I promise to keep our home gentle and strong. I promise to love Griffin as my own and to raise our baby with a steady heart." When the time came to kiss, it was not loud or showy. It was soft and certain. Somewhere behind them, Mrs. Lane dabbed her eyes with a napkin. The cook cheered. Mr. Hale clapped with a small smile on his face. Griffin shouted, "Yay!" and threw a handful of petals straight up so they rained down on everyone. including himself. Afterward they ate a simple meal under the trees. There were sandwiches and fruit, small cakes with white icing, and lemonade with a slice of lemon floating on top. Brian and Megan took turns sitting because Megan got tired quickly now. Every time she reached for her belly, Brian's eyes flicked there too, as if he could not help himself. "Do you feel okay?" he kept asking in a soft voice. "I feel happy," she kept answering. "And a little hungry." "Good," he said, handing her another small cake. Before sunset they took pictures. No one told them to pose like models. They stood how they usually stood, with Brian's arm around Megan and Griffin tucked in front. In one picture, Griffin held Megan's belly as if he was already hugging his new sibling. In another, Brian kissed the top of Megan's head while she closed her eyes. When guests left, the garden grew quiet again. Fireflies blinked like tiny stars. Brian and Megan walked the path slowly, fingers laced. "We're married," she said softly, almost to herself. "We are," he said. "And we will be every day." They stopped under the arch of flowers, the same place where they had said their vows. The moon rose, full and calm. Brian kissed her there, under the moon, and the kiss felt like a promise written on the sky. The weeks that followed were gentle. Brian had lawyers set the last pieces in place with the police and with the court. There were no surprises. There were also no more whispers that mattered. People always talked. That was their habit. Brian focused on home. Megan had regular checkups at the clinic. The doctor showed them the growing baby on a screen. The shape was small but clear. A tiny hand moved like a wave. Griffin pointed, mouth open, and then he laughed in wonder. "Is the baby waving at me?" he asked. "Maybe," Megan said, smiling. She knows her big brother's voice. "Is it a she?" he asked, bouncing. "We'll know soon," Brian said, squeezing Megan's hand. A week later they knew. The doctor smiled and pointed again. "It's a girl," she said. Griffin jumped so high he nearly fell off the stool. "I'm going to have a sister." In the car on the way home he planned everything. He would read to her. He would give her his blue dinosaur when she cried. He would teach her to say his name first. "Griffin," he repeated, tapping his chest. "That's easy." At home, the guesthouse spare room became a nursery. The walls were painted a soft cream. A small wooden crib stood by the window. Megan chose a quilt with little stars. Brian sat on the floor one Saturday, putting together a rocking chair from a box. After he built it, he rocked for a minute with a proud smile, as if he'd built a castle. "What should we name her?" he asked one evening, as they folded tiny clothes at the dining table. Megan held a little hat between her fingers. She looked down at it, then up at him. "I was thinking Hope," she said quietly, "because that's what she gave me while she grew inside me." Brian repeated the name, tasting it. "Hope," he nodded. "It's perfect." Griffin tried the name too. "Baby Hope," he said, as if it were a title. "Princess of Giggles." They all laughed. The closer Megan got to her due date, the more careful everyone became. Brian checked the car daily, making sure the tank was full. Mrs. Lane made a small bag with snacks and a blanket. The cook kept extra soup ready in the freezer. Griffin became an expert at picking up anything Megan dropped, and he refused to let her carry even a pillow. "I'm strong," he told her seriously. "You're extra strong. But today I'm the helper." "You are," she agreed, letting him feel proud. There was a small scare one evening when Megan felt sharp cramps. Brian rushed her to the hospital, hands tight on the wheel, but the doctor smiled kindly after the exam. "Not yet," she said. "Soon. Go home and rest." Brian laughed with relief and then apologized for laughing. Megan squeezed his hand. "We're learning," she said. "It's okay." On the night it really happened, the sky was dark and full of rain. It had been warm all day, and then the weather turned without warning. Thunder rolled low and long. The rain began as a whisper and then became a sheet of sound. Megan woke with a tight pain across her belly that took her breath. She sat up slowly and timed the next wave. Came sooner than she expected. She breathed how the nurse had shown her. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She reached for the lamp and turned it on. Brian was already moving. "Is it time?" he asked, voice low but steady. "I think so," she said, trying to keep her own voice calm. She felt another squeeze, stronger this time. Yes. He was ready in less than a minute, shoes on, keys in hand, hospital bag in the other. "I'll get the car. Do you think you can walk?" "I can," she said. "I can." He helped her into a coat and guided her through the rain. The driveway glowed under the lights. The car door opened, and she slid in, holding her belly with both hands. Her breath came fast. He drove carefully but quickly, his eyes flicking to her face at every stoplight. "You're doing great," he said over the sound of the rain. "I'm right here." "I know," she said, and she did. At the hospital, nurses moved with calm speed, checking her, asking gentle questions. They led her into a clean room with a big window where the rain drummed like fingers. Brian stayed by her side. He counted breaths with her. He pressed cool cloths to her forehead. He didn't leave, not even once. Time stretched. The world narrowed to the rise and fall of pain. The rhythm of breath. The soft voices of nurses. Brian's steady hand around hers. She remembered the old nights under a bare roof. The fear. The cold. This was not that. This was pain that had purpose. This was pain that led to joy. When it was time to push, the nurse's voice grew firm and kind. Megan dug deep into a place she had used to survive before. The place that said keep going when everything hurt. Brian's voice guided her like a line of light. The doctor said, "You're almost there. One more." Then the room filled with a new sound. A high, bright cry that lifted the roof of her heart. Megan let out a sob that was also a laugh. The nurse placed a warm, wet, wiggling baby on her chest, and the world changed shape. "Hello, Hope?" Megan whispered, touching the tiny back, the tiny fingers that grabbed onto her. "Hello, my girl." Brian's face was wet, though the rain was outside. "She's beautiful," he said, voice rough. He kissed Megan's hair. "You're amazing." The nurse cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a soft blanket with pink edges. Hope's eyes squinted, then opened, dark and curious. She made a small sound like a new bird. "Hi," Brian said gently, brushing one finger over her cheek. "I'm your dad." They stayed like that for a long time, drinking in the newness. The storm slowed. Dawn, pale and gentle, began to push against the dark. Later that morning, Griffin walked into the room holding Mrs. Lane's hand. He had flowers he'd picked from the garden in a little bundle tied with string. He wasn't sure if he should run or tiptoe, so he did an awkward quick walk that made everyone smile. "Megan," he said in a hushed shout. "Daddy." Then he saw the tiny bundle and stopped, eyes huge. "Is that her?" "This is her," Brian said, grinning. "Come meet your sister." Griffin came close to the bed and stood on his toes to see. He looked at the baby for a full 10 seconds without speaking. Then his face broke into a smile that Megan would remember forever. "Now I have a sister," he whispered, almost in awe. He touched the edge of the blanket and then looked at Megan. "Thank you." Megan laughed softly. "We all made her," she said. "Together." Griffin nodded like a little man who had just been given a big job. "Hi, Hope," he said to the baby. "I'm your brother. I'll read you stories. And I'll share my blue dinosaur when you're big enough." Hope made a tiny sigh and seemed to settle more comfortably in Megan's arms. Griffin leaned his head against the bed like he wanted to hug them both at once. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel so you'll be notified when I upload a new video, and do tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.